Hi, my name is Damien, and you may recognize me from your dreams. Who we kidding, you probably just recognize me from these videos, if anything. Anyway, my buddy Squire is out of town this week, and so I let myself into his house using this key. So we'll be filming here today. Recently, I was recollecting an interlocutory exchange I was having with a friend of mine, who's also my dentist. And he asked the question, how is it that people can tell the difference between an interruption in their lives versus a disruption in their lives? And I suspect that for many people all around the globe, that is a question they're asking themselves now. Of course, those two words can be used fairly interchangeably. So just to make sure we were all on the same page, I went ahead and checked in my handy-dandy Funk and Wagnalls dictionary for a definition, and here's what I found. Interruption, the act of interrupting, which is very helpful. Or the state of being interrupted, the act which interrupts. A temporary cessation. Now for our purposes, we'll focus on that last definition. Disruption. To throw into disorder, upset, to halt or impede movement of, procedure, etc. To break or burst apart. A temporary cessation versus to break or burst apart. Imagine it like this. You get together with a few of your buddies, and you're playing a friendly game of Risk. And one of your buddies, he gets a phone call from his significant other, and so he stops the gameplay to take the call. That is a minor interruption. That's no big deal. Now, of course, if he's the one that stops the gameplay to make the phone call, well, he's probably just being rude, but it's still just an interruption, no biggie. On the other hand, imagining that you're still playing your friendly game of Risk, let's say hypothetically, TJ and Matthew, they team up against you while you're playing, and they are just destroying your armies and paying no regard to your strategy that you've laid out, and your pieces are going all over the place until you're basically out, and then you, in a completely understandable, totally justifiable display of righteous indignation, you flip the game board over and send all their pieces scattered about so they know how it feels. That would be a disruption. But anyway, every so often we have a tendency to perhaps mix up these two things, interruption versus disruption. We mix them up. And other times we might even put them all in the exact same category when they shouldn't be. When I was still a young man, not the aged sage you see before you today, I was rather proud of the fact that I had never broken a single bone. Now I realize that's nothing to be proud about. That's no accomplishment really, but I was proud of that fact just the same. And then I was involved in an accident, and some bones were broken. My teeth were knocked out. Some of the scars that I have, you may have noticed, it came from that. For instance, my eye, and I was blind in my left eye. The frontal sinus of my skull was broken, and so to fix that, rather than cutting across my forehead, they'd cut across the top, pull it down, fix it, pull it back up, and then staple it back together. And I couldn't move from the waist down. There was some serious trauma that had happened. My right leg, parts of it were just shattered, obliterated. But once I regained feeling and movement in my legs again, I had to learn to walk again. And in my youthful optimism, I had figured that I would learn to walk again, no problem. I'd be running again, no problem. I'd be back at it. I'd be back to running track. Unfortunately, I never got to run track again. But it wasn't all bad. Because not only did I have to relearn to walk, which I did, I had to relearn to put my faith and my life into God's hands. Which, just to be clear, is a very good thing. As a teenager, I used to love to create art of various kinds, but I really loved drawing. I wanted to be able to draw like Norman Rockwell, but my style was more somewhere between Chick Young and Gary Larson on the best of days. Now those guys are both talented artists. I'm just saying that there was this big divide between what I wanted to be able to do and what I was actually capable of doing. And as a teenager, I already had a lot of hurt, a lot of disappointment, a dash of anger, and a whole heap of angst. Artistic expression was very cathartic for me. So I was drawing all the time. I have 2 younger sisters. The one after me, Belem, is 11 years my junior. And as a little girl, she was very sweet and affectionate. A little bit melodramatic, but she was perfectly content to entertain herself. My youngest sister, Christina, is 12 years my junior. As a little girl, she was very sweet and affectionate. And she always wanted to cozy up and be involved in what you were doing. I regret that in my mental and emotional state at that time, I was unable to appreciate that about her. And she'd come by all smiles, frizzy hair, just wanting to be close, wanting to see what I was doing, wanting to be a part of what I was doing. But almost inevitably, she'd accidentally bump the table. And I'd move and I'd mess up a line and I would get grumpy, as if I didn't own an eraser to fix the mistake. I'd view her minor interruption as though it were some life-altering disruption. And I regret that very much. Today I would love it if my sisters would interrupt me a little bit more. What about you? Do you feel that perhaps your life is experiencing an interruption? Or do you feel that maybe your life is going through more of a disruption? And what do we do about it? What's the solution to each of those situations? Well, perhaps the solution to each is the same for both. What I'm suggesting is that perhaps we view either interruption or disruption as an opportunity to do better and to be better. Now, how do we do that? Well, if I may, I'd like to suggest 3 things on how to do that. Now, these 3 points that I'm about to give you, they're not a definitive list on how to do better or be better, but we can certainly view them as starting points. 1, determine your purpose. Let's face facts. All of us could stand to do better in life, to be better in life. I heard someone say once that you should be the kind of person you needed in your life when you were young. And that really stuck with me. We've all been hurt, we've all been let down by others, and while I might not ever get it 100% right, I can at least strive to not be the hurt, to not be the let down in someone else's life, to not be the hurt or let down in my own. Part of your purpose in life, at least part of it, is to be the best you that you can be. So determine, with God as your helper, to do it. If you are doing things or sticking with things that aren't helping you, maybe they're even hurting you, stop. You don't have to stick with things, and dare I say it, you don't even have to stick with people who are hurting you or not helping you or causing you grief or pain. There are better things for you. Ephesians 4 verses 22 through 24 says, "You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness." 2, do the good you should. Everyone has gifts, talents, and abilities that can be used to bless God and others. And in doing so, you will be all the more blessed for it. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, which in a nutshell is to bless God and others, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. In the Bible, we're told to not be the kind of people who just listen to what the Bible tells us, but that we're supposed to be doers of what the Bible tells us to do. In other words, do the good that you should. Be a blessing to God and be a blessing to others. It helps to have other seekers, Christians in your life, to help you along the way. But I don't just mean anyone who calls themselves Christians. I'm talking about good and decent, if even imperfect people. When we're struggling to make it through, it's good to have these people in our lives to come alongside us. Sometimes they can help you through some things because, well, they've struggled through it themselves. We need faithful people in our lives who will encourage us, people who will motivate us, people who want to help us, people who will pray for us. And hopefully, we'll be able to do the same for others eventually too. And one more thing about doing the good that you should. It's not just about not doing bad things. It's about replacing bad habits with good habits. It's been said that nature hates a vacuum. If you have a bottle and you take out all the air from the bottle, well, eventually air is just going to try to rush back in. But if you take all the air out of the bottle and then you replace it with something of substance, basically air will no longer be able to come back into it. And the same thing is true for our spirits. The same thing is true for our habits. Replace bad for good. Replace okay for better. And finally, 3. Desire grace. Perhaps another way to say that is be patient. It may take a while to get to where you want to be. Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary of doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Good habits don't always develop overnight. Seeing the benefit of your efforts likewise doesn't always happen right away. Keep on keeping on. Maybe doing good for an eternity seems a bit daunting to you. Well, don't worry about it. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Instead, ask yourself if you can do good for just today. Start off with 1 minute, then another minute, then another, then 5 minutes, then challenge yourself to 10 minutes of doing good, 20 minutes, eventually an hour. And if you're still struggling to do the good that you should, hopefully by this point you'll have some fellow seekers, trusted friends, who'll be able to come alongside you. Count on them. Lean on these people. They do want to help you. I have a very dear friend who has told me on more than one occasion, I don't want to burden you with my problems. Now, on the one hand, I understand that because, well, I often feel the same way. I don't want to feel like I'm burdening anyone. But on the other hand, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that you don't want to be a burden, because if you're my friend, if I care about you, I want you to be able to talk to me. I want you to be able to have confidence in me. I want to be able to at least try to help you out. In fact, it's more of a burden to me if I feel like you can't do that, that you can't talk to me, that you can't have confidence in me, that you don't want to let me help out. And as I was preparing for this video, I happened upon a passage of scripture that perfectly backs up the point I'm trying to make. Galatians 6:2 reads, "By bearing each other's burdens, you truly fulfill the law of Christ." So please, let others, let me help share your burdens, to help carry your burdens with you. You don't have to go through this rough journey called life all alone. Let God use us to be a disruption, or at the very least an interruption, to the negativity in your life. Because there's a lot of good, a lot of positivity in your life to be had. I'm eating popcorn in your bed, Squire! Come stop me!